Have you ever wondered why the man who seems to need nothing commands the deepest respect? In a world where desire is worshipped, where craving is disguised as ambition, and where dependence masquerades as love, true strength is revealed not in the abundance of possessions or followers, but in the quiet sovereignty of one who stands alone. Picture the figure of a Stoic, framed against the chaos of empire or the noise of the marketplace. He does not reach outward to clutch at approval, nor bend himself to the whims of the crowd. He is whole in himself, and that wholeness terrifies those who seek to control, because you cannot enslave what does not crave. Strength that needs nothing is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. It is the difference between the lion pacing the cage and the lion sleeping beneath the open sky. The cage rattles because desire claws against its bars. The sky is silent because sovereignty has no boundary. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he was describing a kingdom more vast than Rome, the dominion of the self. And here lies the paradox. When you cease to clutch at life, life bends in your direction. The less you demand, the more is freely given, because your presence radiates the authority of one who does not beg. Consider how often people build their identities upon fragile scaffolding. The relationship that validates them, the title that defines them, the audience that applauds them. Remove any one of these, and the structure collapses into dust. Yet the Stoic teaches that the true foundation is internal. The individual who can strip himself bare of titles, applause, possessions, and still remain unbroken, has touched the marrow of freedom. He has entered the archetype of the sage, the timeless figure who walks between centuries with the same calm gaze, unmoved by fortune's shifting winds. But what of you? Can you endure the silence of being unneeded? Can you look in the mirror without the ornaments of validation and still recognize worth staring back? To need nothing is not to withdraw from life, but to engage with it without chains. The lover who does not beg for affection is the one whose embrace is most desired. The leader who does not cling to power is the one whose rule endures longest. And the individual who does not seek control over others is the one who, paradoxically, holds the deepest influence. Because need is weakness disguised as longing, while sufficiency is strength disguised as peace. Modern psychology echoes what ancient Stoics intuited. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole, by integrating the shadows, the projections, the unconscious fragments we cast onto others. When you crave something from another, approval, love, recognition, it is often your shadow speaking. You demand from the world what you have not yet granted yourself. The applause you seek is the affirmation you have not given to your own soul. The love you chase is the acceptance you have withheld from your own reflection. And so, the work is not to bind another to you, but to reclaim those exiled fragments and stitch them back into the fabric of your being. Then, and only then, can you stand unshaken. Strength that needs nothing is magnetic because it is rare. Most people's worth is hostage to circumstance. Strip away their wealth and panic seizes them. Remove their partner and identity crumbles. Deny them praise and they wither. Yet the man or woman who can be emptied of all these things and still breathe calmly is ungovernable. They embody a serenity that feels like defiance in a culture addicted to hunger. It is not arrogance, nor apathy, but clarity, the knowledge that nothing external can add to what is already whole within. To look upon such a person is to encounter a mirror, one that reflects not your power over them, but your dependence upon them. So the question lingers, where do you still beg? In whose hands have you placed your worth? What would be left of you if all your ornaments fell away? The Stoic answer is both brutal and liberating. Everything that can be taken was never yours. What remains, your reason, your will, your character, that is where strength is forged. And when strength is forged, it ceases to need, it ceases to chase. It becomes the still flame that burns without fuel, the river that flows without force, the presence that bends life around it, simply by standing. The man who needs nothing walks through the world as if through shifting smoke, untouched, unmarked, unbound. To others, this appears almost inhuman because most people live as extensions of their attachments. They are woven into the applause, the relationships, the identities assigned to them. Without these, they are shadows, trembling at the edge of the firelight. But the Stoic, the individuated one, carries his own fire inside. His worth is not borrowed, it is inherent. And because of that, he cannot be manipulated by scarcity, seduction, or fear. He has already faced the emptiness within and discovered it was not emptiness at all, but a wellspring of sufficiency. This strength is not cold detachment, as critics often misunderstand. It is not the frozen heart that refuses to feel. On the contrary, it is a furnace, alive, fierce, but contained. Imagine a river in flood, spilling over its banks, destroying the very villages it promised to nourish. That is desire ungoverned. Now imagine that same river channeled, directed, its waters feeding the fields, carrying ships, giving life. That is passion under discipline. To need nothing does not mean to extinguish passion. It means to govern it, to master its flow so it serves rather than enslaves. Only then can one love without addiction, lead without tyranny, and act without desperation. Psychology reveals the same truth through another lens. The child who never received affirmation may grow into the adult who craves it endlessly, building their life upon the trembling foundation of others' approval. Every achievement, every relationship becomes a performance staged for an invisible audience. Jung warned of this, the danger of projection, of seeking in others the wholeness that can only be forged within, and so long as one projects, one is enslaved. Every rejection becomes a wound, every silence a threat. But when the shadow is faced, when the disowned parts of the self are reclaimed, something extraordinary happens. The audience vanishes, the applause becomes irrelevant, the stage dissolves. All that remains is the steady presence of the self, whole at last. This is why such a person radiates quiet power. They do not enter the room demanding to be seen. They are seen precisely because they do not demand. Their calm is not weakness, but command of themselves, and therefore of the moment. Others lean toward them without knowing why, sensing the magnetic paradox. A person who could walk away at any moment and yet chooses to stay. This is the archetype of the sovereign, the one who does not conquer by force, but by presence. And presence is the highest form of power, because it requires nothing and therefore cannot be stolen. But what about you? Can you endure a love that does not beg? Can you hold authority without needing control? Can you remain still while the world tries to provoke reaction after reaction? Most cannot, and so they dance like marionettes, pulled by invisible strings of fear and desire. Yet freedom lies in the cutting of those strings, in standing alone as your own master. The test of strength is not how much weight you can lift, but how much loss you can carry without losing yourself. It is not how loudly you speak, but how deeply you remain silent when silence is power. To need nothing is to walk unarmed into battle and still be unconquerable. Epictetus taught that chains are not made of iron, but of desire. A man enslaved to craving is already captured, even if no prison surrounds him, and the chains are subtle. They wrap themselves around your longing for recognition, your fear of abandonment, your hunger for certainty. Break these chains, and you become untouchable. Life may strip away everything external, but it cannot touch the sovereign who has built his fortress within. That is why true strength has no need, because it is already full, already whole, already free. The woman who understands this does not collapse when love withdraws. She knows her worth was never a gift from another. The man who embodies this does not tremble when wealth fades. He knows fortune is an indifferent goddess, fickle in her favors. The soul who lives this truth walks through storms as though through falling petals, untouched. For the storm cannot drown one who carries the sky within. Strength that needs nothing does not appear suddenly. It is born from fire, loss, and confrontation with the self. Every individual must pass through the crucible: abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, failure, moments when the outer scaffolding collapses and all that remains is the naked core of being. It is here, in the ashes, that true power is revealed. Those who cling to illusions fall apart. Those who turn inward discover that what they thought was emptiness is in fact resilience, deeper than the roots of mountains. The Stoics understood this as the practice of amor fati, love of fate, to embrace life not only in its sweetness, but in its cruelty, without resistance. When fortune strikes, most cry out in anger, as though the world owed them gentleness. But the one who needs nothing accepts the blows as he accepts the gifts, knowing both are transient. Joy does not intoxicate him, nor does grief consume him. His center remains steady, because he never built his house upon what the winds of chance could sweep away. His dwelling is the mind, disciplined and whole. Psychology calls this integration. Trauma often fractures the self, leaving parts of the psyche disowned, fearful, hidden, silenced. These fragments then surface in need: the desperate grasp for love, the uncontrollable rage when abandoned, the gnawing anxiety when unseen. But when the fragments are faced and embraced, the psyche becomes one. What once was need becomes strength. What once was hunger becomes clarity. Jung wrote that wholeness is not achieved by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The one who dares to descend into their own abyss returns with treasure, the ability to live without demand, because nothing within is missing, and so the sovereign soul no longer begs. They may love, but without fear of loss. They may lead, but without thirst for control. They may succeed, but without the terror of failure. Others look upon them with awe, because such a life seems beyond reach. But it is not beyond reach. It is simply beyond comfort. To live this way requires standing in silence when others clamor for noise, detaching when others cling, letting go when others demand. It requires the courage to walk alone, knowing that solitude is not exile, but sanctuary. You too are tested in this way. Every disappointment is an invitation to see where your chains still lie. Every silence from another reveals where you still hunger to be fed. Every rejection shows where your worth has been misplaced. These are not curses, but mirrors, placed before you so that you may finally see. And when you see, you can choose. Will you continue to beg for what can be taken away? Or will you turn inward and forge strength from the only place it can never be stolen? The greatest paradox is this: the less you need, the more life comes to you. The lover who does not demand is cherished. The leader who does not cling is followed. The individual who does not grasp is given. This is not manipulation. It is magnetism, the natural pull of wholeness. People crave to be near those who do not crave. They sense freedom and wish to taste it. And yet, only the one who has walked through fire, through shadow, through silence, can embody this rare radiance. In the end, strength that needs nothing is not about conquest, but about peace. It is the stillness of the mountain, unmoved by storm. It is the calm of the deep ocean, beneath the crashing waves. It is the gaze of the Stoic emperor, writing in solitude by lamplight, while empires trembled outside his tent. To need nothing is to be invincible, not because the world cannot wound you, but because even if it does, you remain whole. True strength needs nothing, because it has already faced the most brutal test, the stripping away of illusions. To live without need is to stand naked before life, exposed to its cruelty and beauty, and to remain unbroken. This is why the archetype of the Stoic carries such weight across centuries. He is the emperor who rules an empire, yet writes to himself as if he were no more than dust. He is the slave, chained and beaten, who speaks of freedom as though he were already sovereign. Both extremes reveal the same truth, that strength does not come from circumstance, but from stance, the way one meets fate, not the gifts fate bestows. Modern thought names this resilience. Psychology speaks of post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where the individual, shattered by loss, rises not weaker but stronger, more whole than before. The fracture becomes the forge. The scar becomes the mark of wisdom. What once was dependency becomes clarity, and what once was longing becomes sufficiency. This is not the avoidance of suffering, but its transformation. And it is why the one who needs nothing does not resist hardship. He welcomes it, because he knows that every blow chisels away the unnecessary until only essence remains. Observe how others live, always bargaining with life, always demanding a return for their efforts. They love in order to be loved back. They give in order to be owed. They endure only for reward. But the one who needs nothing does not bargain. He acts because action itself is virtue. He loves because love itself is abundance. He endures because endurance itself is strength. In this way, his life is uncorrupted by transaction. He becomes the embodiment of freedom, because nothing can be withheld from him if he asks for nothing. But imagine yourself stripped of everything: titles, lovers, wealth, recognition. Would you collapse, or would you remain? The question is not meant to frighten, but to awaken. For until you know the answer, your worth is still in someone else's hands. And so life, with its ruthless wisdom, will test you. It will take what you cling to most, not to destroy you, but to reveal to you where you are still chained. Every silence, every loss, every rejection is not punishment but invitation to return to the self, to reclaim what was never outside you in the first place. This is why those who need nothing glow with an almost unsettling serenity. Their presence exposes others' dependencies. In their calm, you feel your own restlessness. In their detachment, you sense your own chains. Some will envy them, some will despise them, but all will notice them. For true strength cannot be hidden. It emanates like light through cracks in stone, undeniable, uncontainable, and those who carry it need no defense, no justification, no mask. They are already whole. To live this way requires discipline sharper than steel. It is not mere withdrawal, not cynicism or apathy. It is the daily practice of awareness, to see where desire manipulates, to feel where fear dictates, to notice when validation seduces, and in noticing, to reclaim your power. Strength that needs nothing is built not in grand declarations, but in small choices repeated until they become soul. To rise without bitterness when ignored, to walk without grasping when abandoned, to give without expectation when unthanked. This is the architecture of sovereignty, stone laid upon stone, until the fortress within is complete. So the question remains for you. Will you continue to scatter fragments of yourself across the hands of others? Or will you gather them back, piece by piece, until nothing is missing? For the day you no longer need, the day you are complete in your own being, you will discover what the Stoics already knew, that to be unshaken is to be free, and to be free is to be untouchable. To need nothing is to stand at the edge of the world and smile at its fleeting offers. Wealth comes and goes, yet the sovereign remains. Lovers enter and depart, yet the sovereign remains. Crowds cheer and then vanish into silence, yet still the sovereign remains. This permanence is not because life spares such a person, but because life cannot take from what is already whole. The one who has discovered sufficiency within has already conquered the deepest enemy, the illusion that fulfillment lies outside. The Stoic teaches that suffering is multiplied when we demand the world to be other than it is. Pain is inevitable, loss is inevitable, but anguish arises when you insist it should not be so. To need nothing is to step outside this trap. It is to meet reality on its own terms, to embrace it fully, without protest or denial. This is not surrender in weakness, but alignment in strength. The warrior who resists the river is drowned. The warrior who flows with it becomes unstoppable. Such is the way of inner sovereignty, bending without breaking, moving without losing the center. Consider how often people enslave themselves through their longings. The desire to be loved makes them grovel. The desire to be recognized makes them betray themselves. The desire for certainty makes them cling to illusions. Every need is a leash, and whoever supplies it becomes the master. Yet when you release the need, the leash falls, and suddenly, no one holds you, not fortune, not lover, not fear. You are free. And in that freedom, a new kind of power emerges, the power to choose without compulsion, to love without fear, to stand without trembling. Jung understood this as the integration of opposites, the meeting of the conscious and unconscious, the union of light and shadow. Need often arises from the unacknowledged wound, the hidden hunger of the child still crying in the depths of the soul. Left unseen, that child reaches outward endlessly, searching for what was withheld. But the one who dares to face the shadow, to cradle that hidden self with compassion, no longer projects the hunger outward. The need dissolves, and in its place grows something unshakable, the recognition that all you sought was already within you. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim the crown. Such individuals radiate a strange peace that unsettles others. Their silence cannot be manipulated. Their affection cannot be bought. Their decisions cannot be coerced. They seem to carry an invisible fortress, not of walls, but of presence. To some, this feels like rejection, because they cannot control it. To others, it feels like sanctuary, because here, finally, is someone who will not collapse beneath pressure. This is why the one who needs nothing becomes both feared and revered. They are beyond transaction. They are untouchable. Ask yourself, what would be left if the applause stopped? If the partner left? If the wealth dissolved? Could you still stand whole, unmoved, radiant in your own being? Or would you crumble, searching for fragments of yourself scattered in the hands of others? The invitation of life is always the same: to reclaim yourself, piece by piece, until no one else holds your worth. Then you will stand as the Stoics once stood, in silence, in strength, in serenity. For true strength is not the absence of pain, but the refusal to be defined by it. It is not the absence of longing, but the refusal to kneel before it. It is not the absence of love, but the presence of love so complete that it does not beg to be returned. Strength that needs nothing is the final alchemy of the soul. Desire transformed into peace, dependency transformed into power, longing transformed into freedom. True strength that needs nothing is not a rejection of life, but the deepest embrace of it. When you stand whole in yourself, you can finally engage the world without distortion. Love becomes purer because it is no longer a bargain. Service becomes freer because it is no longer an attempt to prove worth. Success becomes lighter because it is no longer the drug that silences inner emptiness. Everything you do flows, not from hunger, but from fullness. And fullness does not cling, it overflows. This is why the Stoics spoke often of virtue as the only true good. Wealth, pleasure, fame, even love, these are not inherently wrong, but they are unstable. To anchor your soul in them is to lash your ship to a crumbling pier. Virtue, by contrast, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, these are internal states, cultivated by choice, untouchable by fate. They remain even when fortune turns cruel. A man or woman who embodies them may be stripped of everything and yet still radiate dignity. Their power is not contingent, but constant. That is why such people frighten tyrants and inspire the broken. They cannot be bought. They cannot be bent. In modern terms, this is the movement from external to internal locus of control. The fragile psyche believes its worth rises and falls with circumstances. The sovereign psyche knows its worth resides in its own choices, its own responses, its own character. Nothing external can add to or subtract from that essence. This is not arrogance, but clarity. The arrogance of the needy is louder, always demanding, always performing. The clarity of the whole is quieter, but its silence resounds like thunder. And yet, do not mistake this wholeness for withdrawal. The one who needs nothing does not hide from the world. On the contrary, they are more engaged because they are not protecting themselves from loss. They can give fully, risk fully, speak fully, because they have nothing to lose that could diminish them. Their love is fiercer because it is not bound by fear. Their leadership is bolder because it is not shackled by ego. Their presence is freer because it is not distorted by performance. Only the one who does not need is truly capable of offering. But look closely. Can you see the places in your own life where need still governs? The silence that feels unbearable unless someone fills it. The rejection that feels like death because it strikes at hidden wounds. The hunger for recognition that keeps you restless, scrolling, striving. These are the places where your sovereignty is still fractured. And these are the invitations. For every ache, every longing, every fear is a door into yourself. Behind it waits not emptiness, but the very strength you thought you lacked. To need nothing is to pass through these doors, again and again, until there is no part of you left in exile. It is to sit with the child within, until he no longer cries. It is to face the shadow, until it no longer terrifies. It is to walk into silence, until it no longer feels like abandonment, but sanctuary. Each step reclaims another fragment, until one day you wake and realize there is no one left to complete you, no circumstance left to enslave you, no loss left to break you. You are whole. This is why true strength carries an aura of calm that words cannot explain. It is the serenity of one who has walked into the abyss and returned with treasure. It is the quiet confidence of one who has nothing to prove. It is the peace of one who has died to need and been reborn into freedom. Others sense it, even if they cannot name it. They lean toward it, even if they cannot understand it. And you too can embody it, if you dare to let go of what you think you cannot live without. Strength that needs nothing is not born from denial, but from transformation. The raw hunger that once drove you outward becomes the fire that stabilizes you within. The fear that once made you cling becomes the silence in which you breathe. The longing that once fractured you becomes the wellspring from which you give. This is not the death of desire, but its transfiguration. When need dissolves, desire is no longer a chain, it becomes choice. You no longer beg, you choose. You no longer grasp, you extend. You no longer cling, you release. The Stoics knew this as the secret of freedom. Seneca wrote that, "He who has learned to die has unlearned to serve." To face death, the ultimate loss, is to strip away all other fears. If you can embrace mortality, what is left to terrify you? The one who accepts death has no need to hoard life. He lives with a boldness others cannot fathom, because he does not beg time for more. He simply inhabits each moment as if it were already enough. This is why true strength is radiant. It does not anxiously clutch at tomorrow. It burns fully in today. Modern psychology names this radical acceptance. The anxious mind resists, always fighting against reality, always insisting things must change before peace can arrive. But peace never comes that way. The sovereign psyche stops resisting. It says yes to joy, to sorrow, to loss, to death. In that yes, tension dissolves and strength emerges. This is why the one who needs nothing often appears unbothered by what crushes others. They have ceased waging war against what is. Their energy is no longer consumed by resistance. It is invested in presence, and presence is power. Others feel this instinctively. They see someone who cannot be bribed by applause, who cannot be shattered by rejection, who cannot be bought by promises. Such a person unsettles the insecure, because they reveal how fragile most of us still are. And yet, at the same time, they attract those who yearn for freedom, because in their presence, you glimpse what life could be without chains. That glimpse is both terrifying and intoxicating. It shows you the mirror. How much of your worth still depends on what could vanish tomorrow. And so the question presses closer. What would you be without your scaffolding? Without your carefully curated identity? Without your roles and titles? Without your partners and admirers? Would you collapse, or would you stand? Would you grasp for new ornaments, or would you discover you were already enough? Life, in its unrelenting wisdom, keeps testing you until you answer. Every heartbreak, every failure, every loss is not simply misfortune. It is the teacher stripping you bare, asking, will you remain whole when everything else is gone? To remain whole is to finally become sovereign. It is to know that even in silence, you are heard. Even in solitude, you are complete. Even in loss, you are full. This is not arrogance, nor coldness. It is the deepest compassion. Because only the whole can love without demand. Only the free can serve without resentment. Only the sovereign can walk through fire and emerge with arms open, unburned. And when you live this way, you no longer chase life. Life chases you. Opportunities arrive, not because you crave them, but because you no longer repel them with desperation. People are drawn, not because you beg for love, but because you radiate it without condition. Respect is given, not because you demand it, but because your presence commands it. This is the paradox at the heart of Stoic strength. When you need nothing, you finally receive everything, yet nothing can enslave you again. Strength that needs nothing is the highest form of rebellion in a culture addicted to craving. Everywhere you look, people are persuaded to want more status, more wealth, more validation, more certainty. The machinery of society thrives on dependency. It keeps you restless, always reaching outward, never arriving. Yet the Stoic stands as a contradiction to this endless hunger. By needing nothing, they collapse the very system that feeds on emptiness. Their silence becomes defiance. Their calm becomes power. Their sufficiency becomes liberation. This is why such strength feels almost supernatural when you encounter it. Imagine a man who does not tremble when insulted, because no insult can wound what is already whole. Imagine a woman who does not beg for love, because she has already embraced herself with a depth no lover could surpass. Imagine a leader who does not cling to power, because he knows power is not possession, but stewardship. These figures carry an aura that unsettles, because their freedom cannot be bought, and their presence cannot be controlled. They move through the world as if carrying their own gravity, drawing respect without demand. From the psychological perspective, this is individuation fully lived. The projections have been withdrawn, the shadows integrated, the inner fractures reconciled. Such a person no longer sees in others the missing half of their own soul. They do not project their fear, their hunger, their longing outward. They own it, transform it, and release it. Thus, they no longer meet the world with desperation, but with abundance. Their relationships are no longer prisons of expectation, but free exchanges of presence. Their ambitions are no longer cries of insufficiency, but expressions of creative overflow. They are not incomplete beings reaching outward, but complete beings extending outward. And this is the paradox. The one who needs nothing ends up receiving more than those who beg. For desperation repels, hunger distorts, but fullness attracts. Think of how rivers flow toward the ocean, not because the ocean needs them, but because its depth invites them. In the same way, people are drawn to those who radiate sufficiency. They want to be near it, to taste it, to borrow its peace. Yet the sovereign never clutches, never enslaves. They let others come and go like waves against the shore, knowing that no departure can empty what is already whole. But you must ask yourself honestly, where do you still bow? Where do you still barter your worth? Perhaps it is in the eyes of a partner whose silence feels like death. Perhaps it is in the approval of peers whose recognition defines your sense of value. Perhaps it is in the fragile scaffolding of achievements that crumble when no one notices. These are your chains, and life will continue to rattle them until you break them. Every rejection, every silence, every loss is a lesson, your worth is still hostage. Until you reclaim it, you will remain enslaved to circumstances. To break the chains, you must face the fear beneath them, the fear of being unseen, of being unloved, of being unworthy. You must step into that abyss without flinching, and when you do, you discover something extraordinary. There is no abyss. The worth you feared was absent, has been with you all along, quiet but unwavering. Once you see this, nothing can take it from you. And the moment you no longer beg, you become free. Free to love without chains, free to lead without ego, free to live without fear. This is why true strength is serene. It does not shout, it does not grasp, it does not perform. It simply is. And in its presence, others either recoil in discomfort or lean in with longing. But whether they come or go, the sovereign remains unchanged. For to need nothing is to finally possess everything that matters, yourself. Strength that needs nothing is the quietest revolution because it dismantles the invisible economy of dependence. The world thrives on hunger. Advertisers whisper to your insecurities. Lovers bargain with your need. Leaders exploit your fears. Yet the one who has found sufficiency within cannot be purchased, seduced, or controlled. Their presence disrupts the cycle. They do not play the game, and because of that, they win it, without even trying. The ancient Stoics saw this clearly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that applause was meaningless, that titles were fleeting, that even Rome itself would one day crumble. By stripping away illusions before the world could, he remained untouchable. Epictetus, once a slave, embodied the same truth from the opposite end of fortune. No chain could imprison his mind. No master could own his will. From throne to shackle, the same principle rang true. Strength is measured not by what surrounds you, but by what cannot be taken from you. Modern psychology affirms what these sages lived. Dependency is the root of much suffering. To tie your identity to outcomes, people, or approval is to hand them the keys to your peace. But individuation, the reclaiming of every exiled fragment, the integration of shadow and self, returns the keys where they belong. When you no longer seek the world to complete you, you stop bleeding power into every relationship, every achievement, every silence. Your worth ceases to fluctuate with circumstance. It becomes constant, unshaken. This is the ground of freedom. Such people are rare, and that rarity makes them magnetic. A woman who knows her worth without demanding validation unsettles those who rely on control, yet inspires those who yearn for freedom. A man who leads without needing to dominate is followed more fiercely than the tyrant who commands obedience. A soul who loves without fear of abandonment creates the safest space of all, because they do not cling, they choose. In their freedom, they offer others a glimpse of their own chains, and sometimes that glimpse is enough to awaken change. But freedom is costly. To stand whole, you must release illusions. You must face rejection without collapsing, loss without disintegrating, silence without trembling. You must learn to sit in emptiness until you discover it is not emptiness, but fullness disguised. The work is not glamorous. It happens in dark nights, in quiet rooms, in the hidden chambers of the psyche, where the child still cries for recognition. Yet when that child is embraced, when the shadow is welcomed, the hunger dissolves, and what emerges is not the brittle strength of defense, but the luminous strength of sufficiency. Ask yourself, are you ready to be misunderstood for your calm? Are you willing to lose those who feed on your need? Are you willing to endure the discomfort of standing whole when others tremble in fragments? For this is the cost of sovereignty. True strength requires shedding, not just your chains, but your excuses. And once you shed them, you will walk lighter than you ever thought possible. The journey ends where it began, within. All along, what you sought from others was simply the reflection of what you had not yet claimed. The applause you wanted was the affirmation you withheld from yourself. The love you chased was the acceptance you had not granted your own being. The recognition you begged for was the mirror you refused to look into. And now, as the Stoics taught, you see clearly. You need nothing, because you already are everything you were seeking.